In the Sumerian myth, they say the souls of the dead went deep underground to the House of Ashes.
House of Ashes is the third installment in the Dark Pictures anthology and a return to form for Supermassive Games. Its combination of well-written characters, claustrophobic and genuinely scary environments, and actual supernatural elements made House of Ashes the developer's best game since Until Dawn. This will work exactly like my other Supermassive videos where I play the game and highlight areas when a character can die, whether or not it's included in my own playthrough. At the end, I'll compare my own personal kill count to the fewest and the most kills that can be achieved in a single run. How many sacrifices need to be made to ensure everyone's survival?
That's gotta be about the dumbest question I have ever been asked.
The game opens with a reminder of what the series is all about and grants us the first 4 kills of the game right off the bat. Hell yeah! We go far back in time as the Akkadians are in the process of mass human sacrifice with a Gutian named Karum pleading for his life. His captor Balathu is summoned by his king Naram Sin before he can add another kill to the count. So Karum is taken back to his cell while Balathu is warned by a fellow soldier that their king is going mad in this cursed temple. He's like, well, what can you do? As he joins his king to confirm how mad he really is. Naram Sin demands the execution of this girl that apparently looks like Balathu's dead daughter. That's just disrespectful, but not as disrespectful as this. The prisoner will die regardless, but Balathu can choose not to kill her and instead another soldier does. Balathu shows off his Olympic level shot putting ability before he heads outside to lead their soldiers against the incoming Gutian forces. It cuts to Karum as he's tossed in his cell and immediately sees an opportunity to get his hands dirty for another kill. He opens his cell using the key on the corpse and it cuts back to King Naram Sin staring at the sun like a brain-dead fool. The forces get into position and time their battle perfectly as the eclipse begins. The darkness and quick cuts here make it difficult to verify the kills, but based on the sound cues, it appears as if 5 soldiers fall during the initial fighting. The battle rages on, and the camera pans underground as the feud seems to have awakened something under their feet. We watch as Karim navigates the temple and runs into a couple fresh corpses, and waltzes into the main chamber to find King Naram Sin dead atop his throne. We jump to some Akkadians abandoning the fight outside as something inhuman pursues them. In its POV, we watch it swipe aside 2 humans with ease for 2 more kills. Balathu was the only one to outrun it as he closes the doors behind him, but Karim wants revenge on this dude for trying to kill him. Balathu fends off his attacks, and between his pleas and the weird fucking noises on the other side of that door, Karim changes his tune and helps barricade the door. Realizing these doors won't hold, Balathu suggests they run for the catacombs and take the exit out of there, but quickly find out they aren't alone. Those gross-ass fingies make the 2 men run back the way they came and leave them with one option.
Fight!
They get wrecked, and Balathu is met with the fatality. Karum backs up into a door as the monster leans in and tells him how fucked he is. It cuts away there before we can count to kill, so we'll revisit that later. The prologue ends there and serves as an incredible intro to the game. Supermassive based it loosely on the Curse of Akkad, which details a self-described god, King Naram Sin, that sacked a sacred temple that angered the gods, who sent death and famine down upon him and his followers. Enough about that, because the curator is here to greet us.
It's good to see you again.
Hey, you too, buddy, what you been up to?
Keen to get started.
Oh, okay, all business then. I respect that. We jump forward a few thousand years to 2003 during America's invasion of Iraq, as they search for those WMDs. We meet Lieutenant Jason Kolchak as he greets Colonel Eric King and his assistant Dr. Clarice Stokes to their little base of operations. Eric is there to take command of their unit, and as they head inside, we watch as Sergeant Nick Kay and CIA officer Rachel King are doing something naughty. Nick shows big preach towards Rachel as he copes with a shooting that resulted in a civilian casualty a few weeks prior, but I won't add that to the count since it didn't occur during the course of the game. Rachel is alerted that her husband is in the building, and Nick is like, wah, end your marriage for me. Rachel tells him to put his cock away and fuck off for a bit and jacks his lighter too. As Eric is escorted through the palace returned base, he meets Merwin, who attempts to rizz up Clarice and fails hard.
Hello, Clarice.
Nick saunters up soon after looking like a grumpalumpagus that gives Eric the cold shoulder. Right after, we meet Joey, who wants to stay nice and safe behind his desk, but that doesn't protect him from embarrassment.
Lieutenant Colonel Eric King.
Jason continues leading Eric to the command center and makes a major mistake.
I'm telling you, when the queen bitch finds out about this...
That's my wife you're talking about.
Like Candyman being summoned, Rachel suddenly pops up pissed about her estranged husband taking control of her unit. Eric is all business, informing the team that his satellite program Kalis has picked up a large underground facility that they suspect Saddam Hussein is using to store WMDs. He aims to take them out of there and raid the facility and elects to have air support on standby in case things go awry. There's already a rescue operation in place if they're not heard from within 24 hours, and orders everyone to get prepared. Rachel and Eric discuss their relationship issues, having been on a break for an entire year. But the way Merwin tosses these UV lights on the table is reason for dishonorable discharge, because if you knew just how important those shits will be soon, you'd be real careful with that case. While looking around, Eric notices some white phosphorus rounds and tells the others they are only to be used as cover and not against people. They move out, and so do we, as Salim approaches his home on break from his duties as an Iraqi soldier. He has a gift for his son, who is nowhere to be found. He looks around and notices his son has been stealing shit and calls his neighbor to bond over their dumb thieving children. He asks her to tell his son he's going up for adoption before his captain shows up and pulls him away from home to pursue the American soldiers. It cuts to said Americans as they trade yo mama jokes.
Your mama's so nasty. I called her for phone sex and I got a fucking ear infection.
Yeah? Well, yo mama's so fat the sorting hat put her in the Waffle House.
The fuck y'all laughing at?
We catch a glimpse of the Iraqi soldiers heading in the same direction as the choppers land near some huts. They notice the shepherds outside the huts and Jason has to make a choice. Be lax or assault the house. I elect to assault the home since I don't think they'd want to risk their own safety here. The first death occurs when a shepherd darts out of a room in front of Jason, who reacts instinctively and guns him down. This death is entirely avoidable if you simply let the QTE lapse. Regardless, they clear the house and make sure all shepherds are accounted for. Rachel reprimands Jason for his itchy trigger finger and then focuses her attention on the captives, who refuse to give them any information. There is a route where Rachel kills one of them, but that would need Jason to not assault the house while also becoming enraged at their stick project. They don't find any entrances to an underground facility, just some heroin. With bad news comes even worse news as the circling chopper is suddenly hit by a rocket and crashes, killing the pilot inside. This marks the beginning of a firefight between Iraqi and American forces. Desk jockey Joey is hit right off the bat and takes cover out of sight, but another Marine isn't so lucky and bites the bullet. Jason returns fire and so does the second chopper, but we can't see anyone go down, so we can't count anyone here. The Iraqis are ordered to charge so they can't be torn to shreds by the chopper, and Merwin immediately gains a kill. Jason realizes he needs to keep up and gets his own as well. While pinned down, Merwin suggests they use the white phosphorus on the 5 guys in front of them, and Jason gives him the green light, which adds another 5 kills that would go against the Geneva Convention. Jason breaks cover and earns a quick kill. Nick shows some moves as he smoothly grabs Joey and gets him to safety, but unfortunately, it's too late for him and he succumbs to his wounds. Joey will always die regardless, but there's another method with the Iraqi soldiers simply finishing him off. While Nick mourns his fallen comrade, the second chopper goes down and we can hear the explosion and subsequent ground quake as the pilot goes with it. It cuts back to Jason, who orders a fleeing shepherd to stay put, but he saw what Jason does to them and darts, which results in a couple bullets in the back. Directly after that cold-blooded kill, Salim is prepared to do the same to Jason, but then the ground begins to crumble beneath them and any survivors are sent to the depths. Nick is the first Marine we take control of underground, and man is this game dark. And not in that moody, emotional type of way, but just straight up fucking can't see, dude. Somehow Nick sees something in the darkness and goes the only way forward available to him until he links up with Jason. Nick informs Jason about what he saw in the tunnel, but that's chalked up to PTSD from the incident a few weeks prior. They head out and quickly come across Clarice attempting to help Merwin, who got tangled up in some barbed wire during his fall. Hey Merwin, yo mama's so slow it took her 9 months to make a joke. Okay, maybe not the best time. My bad, dog. They cut him down, but he's severely injured and needs some morphine to ease the pain. But as they work on him, Clarice is suddenly yanked into the shadows. Her disappearance is followed by terrifying screams that convince both Marines they need to get going now. They pull Merwin against a wall and Nick holds his hand over his mouth to shut him up so he can't lure whatever is out there to them. But being caught up in his fear makes him unaware of the fact that he's suffocating his comrade for yet another kill. This is the first time Merwin can die in the game, but if Nick simply pulls his hand away, he can survive. However, Merwin will always die eventually. He can die via blood loss here as well, or later on by the creatures down here, through decapitation or by getting crushed. If he makes it through any of those 3 possible deaths, he'll for sure meet his end by getting shot in the head. We cut to Salim, who finds himself alone in the dark with a corpse of a fallen soldier who definitely didn't die in the battle or the fall. He spots a trail of blood and decides to follow it, but the ground quakes, which makes him lose his AK, which guarantees this will be an awful day. He goes through the tunnels and through a door at the end where another body lays lifeless. Salim doesn't even get a chance to confirm their identity before he's greedily yanked away into the darkness by some hoarding monster. Salim snatches the gun up and books it out of there, unknowingly finding a safe zone due to the sunlight hitting right in front of the entryway. The ground ain't done quaking yet though, and rocks some rubble loose atop the beast. While this particular monster doesn't actually die here, just a reminder I'm only counting humanoids, so these things will not be counted. We cut to Eric and Rachel, who get some time to discuss their marriage. Like in previous Dark Pictures games, they have one actor that lends their likeness and also plays their own character. And in House of Ashes, Ashley Tisdale is that person. This is her only video game credit and marks the only time she starred in a horror title. It's also the first time she got to do motion capture, and mentions how strange it was having to keep some distance from her co-stars, specifically kissing scenes not being done physically, which may explain how fucking weird they look, ugh. As the two of them examine their surroundings, they realize that they've fallen into an ancient temple that contains a relic Father Merrin left behind, oh shit! They traverse around a large dark pit and hear strange screams followed by gunfire. So they do what anyone would do in this situation, and rappel down to check it out. They enter a much larger chamber containing World War II era weapons and archaeological equipment. Eric realizes his satellite program picked this up and not an underground facility with WMDs, and he gets real self-conscious about it.
I know what you're thinking. It's my research led us here.
You don't believe in me?
He admits he missed Rachel, but as a relentless romantic says their break worked wonders on their careers. They activate the generator to provide a little bit of light, so I don't have to lighten the clip. Psych, yes I do, because we immediately join Nick and Jason again as they're chased by a beast. Jason stares death in the face, but his boy Nick ensures that won't happen, just so he can get some peace of mind before watching Eric fail to kiss his wife. He demands to know if she's seeing someone else, but before she answers, a tape recorder kicks on, telling the couple that they awaken an ancient evil down here that needs to remain sealed. And out of nowhere, the Iraqi captain casually rappels down the pit and opens fire on them. But the game wants to keep us on our toes and puts us back with Jason and Nick. As they continue running, Rachel's signal comes in saying they're taking fire. We get to witness more of that as Eric finds an old rope so they can get out of harm's way. But the ground quakes again, which sends them sliding down a steep drop-off. Eric can barely hang on as Rachel dangles in the darkness, and as she rightfully pointed out earlier, that rope is old enough to cash in Social Security, so it snaps and sends her plummeting right as Nick shows up. But we won't count her as dead until we see her body, even if these guys believe her to be. This scene can actually end in Eric's death, making him the first playable character that can be killed. Dar can end his life if Eric and Rachel alert him to their presence after they run, or he can follow alongside Rachel and gets impaled by a stalagmite. Dar waltzes off with a little smirk instead of finishing them off for some reason, and the curator checks in to remind us Merwin is already dead and the night remains young. Eric and Nick shed Eskimo brother tears, but Jason warns them they need to fall back. He tells Eric that the Iraqi soldiers are the least of their concerns, but Eric is a see it to believe it kind of guy, which is hard to do when it's so dark. Nick and Jason repair the generator, but notice a light going out down another corridor and move up to check it out. They locate a tripwire they swiftly disconnect, and soon after hear a voice that sounds a lot like Joey. But Nick says he saw him die, and knows that it cannot be him. The trend seems to be disbelief, however, and Jason thinks Nick is mistaken. Before they move forward, we join Salim as he moves the debris off the monster so he can get a better look at what was trying to kill him. He runs up into the sunlight and notices it shares a similar weakness to gamers. After noticing a gun does barely anything to it, he gets physical with it instead and impales it through the heart, making Salim the first to take down one of these monsters. But that's not the only danger to him down here, as Salim hides from some Americans, who get slaughtered by the monsters that remain out of sight. Salim drops into some tunnels and spots another beast up ahead. But then it cuts to the trio searching for Joey, finding his glasses and pack on the ground. During their search, the Iraqi captain lies in wait and opens fire. Nick is able to wound him, but Dar lobs a grenade that forces Nick to retreat and become separated from the group after the explosion cuts him off. Supermassive always uses inspiration from other horror titles for their games, with Man of Medan being heavily influenced by Ghost Ship, Little Hope, and Silent Hill, and this game is mainly inspired by the 2005 film The Descent, which is obvious when the characters start exploring these tunnels and the monsters show up. Salim sneaks up behind Nick and tells him to keep quiet, warning him of a demon up ahead. As they hatch a plan to take it down, we can see see the monster looming over another dead body. They split up and quietly flank it, using their combined force to take it down together. They bond over their monster hunting skills, but then Nick hears Jason and Eric approaching. Knowing they may not be so keen to see Salim, he suggests he go and take cover. The following scene can end in Eric's death if Nick reveals Salim's location, but in my game he ensures he remains unfound and the Americans drag the corpse of the monster back to the main chamber where they begin setting up a perimeter. Cameras are set so they can keep an eye on each entrance, and both Nick and Jason put down some mines along the walls of a main corridor in case anyone or anything decides to try and surprise them. As they do that, we jump to Rachel and confirm she's still alive, but wakes up in a nightmare scenario covered in blood and who knows what else. She's not alone down here as she slowly sifts through the thick water and uses a bone as a torch. A note she finds down here mentions the saliva of these creatures can lead to a fun night of tripping if done correctly. But that night is not tonight. Rachel runs from the monster and luckily finds company in Clarice, who uses some unstable rocks to close off the path behind them. We cut to Eric as he examines the body of the beast and discovers UV light is a major weakness. Despite the literal fire in front of him, a noise nearby gets his attention, right as we cut back to Nick and Jason, who discover an old radio that can possibly be used to contact the surface. While checking it out, Jason is proven right in that Joey is still alive. Sort of. He's over here looking silly as hell with those chipmunk teeth, but Eric now knows the weakness of this Pokemon is fire. I'll count this as a separate kill since Joey was turned into a vampire and remains a humanoid version, unlike the others who are something else entirely. He falls down the pit and it brings out a cacophony of vampiric screams from the chasm right as the game sends us back to Rachel and Clarice, who are being followed by Emotep. As they climb out of the pit, Clarice has to stop to retch a little bit. Actually, a lot of it. That is Rachel urging her to keep going so they can try and treat her. They reach a chasm that they can swing across and Rachel does so easily enough, but after reaching the other side, she has to choose whether or not she wants to continue helping Clarice. This moment can lead to Clarice's death two different ways. If you fail the QTE while swinging, Clarice will go next and fall into the chasm. Or if you decide not to give the rope back, then Clarice dies as the vampire infection takes hold. My Rachel elects to help though, and we cut back to Nick fiddling with the radio. He pops a cig in his mouth, making Eric realize that this is the dude Rachel has been S-ing and F-ing, and that's why she has the lighter on her. While they do that, Salim watches from out of sight when Dar comes in wanting to start some shit. Salim warns him they have much greater enemies down here because Dar was somehow able to avoid the vampire presence. As they sort that out, the radio starts transmitting the most annoying sound in the world, which gets those vampires screaming from the depths again. Nick desperately tries to shut it up, and Eric says he's running back to their makeshift base in the temple, but Dart knocks his ass down and opens fire. Nick and Jason return fire while Eric gains his composure. The sequence can result in yet another one of Eric's deaths if he receives no help from Nick and Jason and winds up getting shot and killed by Dar. He lives in my game, however, and they drive the Iraqi captain back. The Marines follow and shut the doors behind them until Rachel's voice echoes out and they let her and Clarice enter. She hugs Nick immediately and Eric looks super pissed about it. Despite the horrors coming for them, Eric questions Rachel about Nick and socks it to him. Rachel confesses to her infidelity and claims she waited for him and just couldn't do it anymore. Clarice is so sick of this conversation she'd rather turn into a vampire, but Jason's not going to let that happen to another one of them, and shoots her in the head to prevent that from happening. The vamps start banging on the door, and with the worst possible timing, the old generator begins acting up. Rachel can meet her first possible death here two different ways. The vampires can play around in those guts, or she can be incinerated if Eric shoots at the generator. Rachel suggests everyone run for the catacombs as there's far too many bogeys to contend with, but 3 are taken out after the generator goes kablooey, and Nick warns everyone to stay in the middle of the corridor to avoid the trip mines. This is a nice way to reward players who are paying attention, because earlier Nick can choose to put the mines in the middle or along the sides, and if you warn the others with incorrect information, Eric, Rachel, and Clarice, if she survived earlier, can be killed by the mines. They do successfully take out some vampires and close the way behind them, but Dar and Salim were waiting for them there. The standoff ends because the Americans outnumber the other two, and Eric elects to keep them free with their weapons since they need to work together. They move into another room that's already occupied by the vampiric version of Karum, who I can now officially add to the count. He was killed and turned into the Ancient One, who can also be Balathu depending on who dies first. They're a vampire that displays more control and intelligence than the bat-like ones we've seen thus far. Eric uses the UV light on him, but his clumsy ass drops the damn thing, which results in the ancient vampire coming for him instead. Nick is like, "Yo, Rachel, leave your husband to die!" But instead, she goes after him and winds up getting bit in the process. She did help with getting him free of the vampire's grasp though, and they all make a run for it except for Dar, who is overpowered and torn to shreds by the vampires. Dar will always die here regardless, but there's a few more deaths that can occur here as well. If Clarice survived earlier, she dies and turns into a vampire, killing Dar for an alternative death, but she can also get to Eric for another kill, who has a second available death if Rachel chooses not to save him, and he's finished off by the Ancient One. Rachel can get impaled by the Ancient One as well, but I keep those two alive for now, and we join Jason and Salim, who got separated from the group. Jason isn't too thrilled about an enemy combatant being his companion, but he sucks it up and even does some vampire killing together. They locate an old medical bay from the archaeologists and uncover some classic treatment options such as TNT, it's dynamite. They wander a bit further until they find a pit emanating some ghostly green light with an elevator sitting at the bottom. Jason sees no other way forward and calls it up, which Salim thinks is fucking crazy because obviously that's where the vampires come from.
If those vampires come from anywhere, it's down there.
Thanks, Salim, that's what I'm saying. But the way back isn't much better, so they begin their descent as we briefly talk to the curator, who just wants to say he hopes everyone is alright. It cuts to 3 years prior as Rachel and Eric get some fried chicken from a familiar diner outside of Little Hope. She remarks on the guy telling her she will never be as happy as she is right now, and that's because she's married to a romantic Terminator.
You know, my sole objective, Rach, is to make you happy.
They pull away and Rachel forgot the golden rule of crossing the street, resulting in a T-bone collision that changed their relationship forever when Eric's leg had to be amputated and he never forgave her for it. That explains their relationship issues and proves that guy at the diner correct. It cuts to Rachel and Nick smashing their lips together. Aw, right in front of Eric? He ain't no cuck and is ready to fuck, but the Ancient One wants a piece and runs hard after them. But not hard enough because the trio are able to remain out of sight and stay quiet as he lazily searches for them. Both Eric and Rachel have death opportunities there. Eric has a second death that's similar, except it can be done by Rachel if she turned into a vampire earlier. Nick is impatient, and instead of tabling this shit for a more reasonable time, he demands Rachel choose between him and Eric right now. She dumps both of them in a straight up power move and walks away.
What just happened?
We just got our asses dumped.
We're bounced over to Salim and Jason, who find themselves in a strange alien-like cavern that is a lot bigger than it looks. Feeling violent, Salim wants to go further and find a way to hurt these monsters, but to do that, they need to remain quiet and watch their step. They happen upon a strange sight, with an ancient-looking man partially decomposed but also alive. This is actually Balathu, who didn't really die at the start, and instead got dragged down here to spend nearly 4,000 years being preserved by some sort of fluid, but unable to move as his body is slowly used as a resource. Salim shows some mercy and finishes him off for good, which won't count as an additional kill since he was counted earlier. They move onwards to find a massive nest of cocoons and a feisty one that breaks out and attacks. Luckily for them, Nick, Eric, and Rachel show up and blast that bitch with a grenade. They run for it and enter a chamber where they discover these creatures were once a peaceful nomadic species that got infected by an alien parasite that turned them into violent vampiric monsters, and then they crash in the earth. Rachel picks up one of the white phosphorus rounds sitting on the table and screams. Realizing she's doomed like Clarice after her bite earlier, she secures the WP between her knees and we get a QTE, which I hit expeditiously for a terrible way to die that puts Rachel on the count.
Probably would have tapped out early on.
Rachel can die a couple other ways here, either via gunshot by Jason or by succumbing to the parasite and dying on her way to becoming a vampire. The surviving four set out to kill some vampires by setting charges near the nest. They're hatching though, so they need to get to it, and Nick volunteers to jump down and act as the sole sacrifice. He hands the detonator over in case he can't make it back, and gets going with Jason and Salim helping guide him from their position. Nick plants several charges without realizing he's being followed. Eventually, Nick is given a choice: advance to the mother lode or settle for what they have and retreat now. But that big ass nest has Nick excited to blow up, so he continues on. Salim realizes they are hatching too quickly though, and that Nick has no chance of surviving, which I ensure with my misclick during these easy as fuck don't move sections. Nick is found out and torn to shreds by the vampires, but alternatively, he can be killed by the Ancient One instead. Knowing he's lost, Jason uses the detonator, killing who knows how many vampires, but we know for sure the Ancient One is caught in the blast and after thousands of years meets his end. The Ancient One has his own set of alternative deaths, with Salim or Nick impaling him down here, but if he makes it to the very end, he'll die there instead if the QTE requirements are met. Jason and Salim Salim rush to the elevator where Eric waits, but the vampires cut Salim off and send him in another direction. Jason gets back to Eric before realizing he lost Salim, and Eric tries convincing him to go, but he says Semper Fi baby and goes back for him, assisting in getting some more vampires killed. They get back to Eric and take the lift up. Both Jason and Salim have plot armor until this sequence where both can meet their end. The vampires can get either one of them, although if Salim shot Eric earlier in the game and Rachel is still alive, she can dome his ass before they leave the cavern. Jason has an additional death available if the Ancient One still lives, but I get these three out alive. They finally make it to the surface and feel sunlight on their face, but their safety is short-lived when the moon stands in the way of the sun and summons the vampires out of their den and chases our survivors into the shepherd's home. They seal all the entrances they can, but this home is in desperate need of the Property Brothers' magic, especially after the vampires tear their way inside. In a hectic battle, the remaining three soldiers fend off the vampires until the eclipse is over and the sunlight kills or sends the others back underground. As you can imagine, this scene can end a lot of different ways, depending on who lives or dies up to this point. Each character can die a number of ways, with regular vampires obviously being one culprit, whereas if Rachel or Clarice turn into vampires, they can make appearances here for some kills. Then, if the Ancient One survives, he can wind up wiping out the remaining survivors to ensure no one lives. Rachel has perhaps one of the shittiest endings available to her though. She can be cocooned and left underground for who knows how long, so dying by the white phosphorus is perhaps a mercy if that's an alternative. I get all three guys out alive who are picked up and brought back to base. The curator states the obvious about some living and some dying, but he looks forward to our next encounter. The end credits show the aftermath with Eric, Jason, and our boy Salim being forced to recount their stories in excruciating detail. They kinda rub in the deaths we caused while saying they need to control the flow of information so no one knows what transpired in those caves. But we know what happened, and if you like this video and subscribe to the channel, we'll make sure it stays that way.
That's all for now.
And that's where House of Ashes ends. It's a fantastic game and shows what the Dark Picture series can really do. It features by far the most amount of on-screen deaths, since Man of Medan had the majority happen off-screen on the ship. I finished my run with 45 total kills, and since it took me 5 hours and 19 minutes to finish the game, that gives us a kill on average every 7.08 minutes. The maximum count available in the game is 50 if all characters die, but it also needs Clarice and Rachel to turn into vampires so their vampire forms can also be killed. If you include the alien vampire deaths, then that number is definitely in the hundreds, if not the thousands after the explosions. The minimum amount is 41, since many deaths are unavoidable, including Joey, Clarice, Merwin, and Dar. I'll be wrapping up Season 1 of the Dark Pictures anthology with The Devil and Me next, then finish up this little supermassive marathon with The Quarry. Thanks as always for watching. I'm King Deschain, signing off for now.